WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Thanks for joining us on Flashpoint. I'm Jane Monreal. Ben Thompson has the week off. Well, as we gear up for the winter months, a new report shows the Carolinas power grid may not be able to survive a severe cold weather event. You might remember last year during Christmas, thousands went without power during a cold snap. And an attack on the power grid in Moore County only made things worse. Now, as demand for electricity increases, some officials are sounding the alarm. Joining us now is Jim Matheson. He is the CEO of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association and a former U.S. Congressman. Mr. Matheson, thank you and welcome to Flashpoint.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Well, how close are we to an energy crisis this winter here in the Carolinas?
If we have extreme cold, we're really at risk for it happening, just like it did last year in the Carolinas on Christmas Eve. You may recall there was a real cold snap, and there were rolling blackouts actually in 9 states, including the Carolinas. And that's what we're concerned about is extreme cold, demand for electricity goes up, demand for natural gas for heating homes goes up, and there's not enough gas to run the power plants that are fueled by that. That risk exists again on any cold snap.
Yeah, I do recall last winter very clearly. What would it take to overwork the power grid?
You know, it's really more than anything temperature driven, but why it's getting a little more risky every year is we're using more and more electricity. Demand is growing. Think of all the electrical devices you use now. We plug into everything, and you know, whether it's cloud computing and AI, we're using more and more electricity in this country. So this is a trend of facing risk during extreme temperature events this trend has been developing for years, and each year the risk gets a little greater because demand is going up and we're not increasing amount of electricity supply we have in this country.
All right. Well, one of the things you mentioned that's also mentioned in the report, of course, that huge snap that we experienced last Christmas.
Yeah.
Power outages across the region. Has anything really changed since then that would stop this from happening again?
Well, sadly, the answer to that is nothing's changed that's going to make it better. What's making it just a little bit worse is demand has grown from last winter to this winter. The projected amount of electricity we would use has gone up. So I'm not saying you're going to have blackouts every week. Don't overinterpret what I'm saying, but the risk is just as great as last year, if not a little more. And it's going to take some time for the utility industry to be able to invest in new power plants to help make this go. And really, we need public policy to allow us to do that in a way where it doesn't take years and years and years to get permits to build new infrastructure, because that's what it's going to take is more electric generating capacity, more electric transmission lines, more gas pipelines. We have the technology. It's just, can we deploy it?
Well, that's obviously going to sound like it's going to take some time. And not just the electric grid, right? As we think of it, there's also a concern over generators and access to extreme weather events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. And, you know, and not everyone can afford a generator for their home anyway, too. That's the other thing. I mean, it's asking a lot to say to people, well, because public policy has prevented us from building new power plants, you got to go out and spend a bunch of money to get a generator for your home. I don't think that's a very good answer, quite frankly. I think that we need to allow the electric utility industry to take the necessary steps to reduce this risk of these outages. And look, under normal conditions, we'll be fine. It's just when you have an extreme cold event, kind of like a polar vortex, that's when we're at risk. And that's why we need to make these investments.
The other thing, Jim, that's happened across the Carolinas and in other parts of the country as well, attacks on substations last December.
Yeah.
I remember the power station attacks in Moore County, proving just how vulnerable the power system really is. Do we need to see more security to protect our already vulnerable grid?
Well, I can tell you that the electric utility sector, and I'm speaking for electric cooperatives who I work for, we have taken steps to create greater security, to harden those sites. Yes, the infrastructure is dispersed all over the place, and so there's a certain vulnerability, but I can tell you that particularly based on those incidents in the Carolinas, the electric utility sector has responded, and they have enhanced security to reduce that risk.
All right, so we're learning from our past. What else, what other lessons can we all know about as consumers then moving forward?
Well, you know, in the short term, and this, to the extent we face if there's a real cold snap, if there's going to be outages, number one, make sure you got batteries for your flashlight. Number two, extra blankets to stay warm. And number three, if the local utility is asking everyone to conserve and reduce their power use, think about that now. So you kind of have a plan in place so you're not have to make it up in the moment about things you can do to help. I don't think that's the ultimate answer for consumers. Like I said, ultimately, we got to build more generating plants. But in the situation we're in now, if there's a cold snap, those are the things consumers can do to help with the problem.
Let's talk about transportation. As more people and the federal government push for more electric vehicles on the roads, is our electric grid ready to handle that with more and more electricity?
It's another example of where demand is growing for electricity. As I said, data centers and the cloud computing and AI are the really big drivers of electric demand, but electric vehicles are going to drive it too. And you've raised a fair point. You're going to need more electricity for it, but you know what else you're going to need? You're going to need more just delivery systems so that we can power all those vehicles. If you have let's say you have a truck stop that normally everyone goes on the interstate to get gasoline for the vehicle. If it's going to have a bunch of charging stations there, you don't just put up a charging station and it works. You've got to have this infrastructure behind it to make sure that electricity is being delivered. So there are significant investments that are going to have to be made if we're going to have reliable electricity to power future electric vehicles. No question about it.
You've answered this in one way or another, but what is it going to take then to step up energy production, and how does renewable energy play into all this?
Well, first I'll mention renewable energy. Renewable energy has a role to play. There's no question it has a value, but it has a limitation because the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day and the wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day. So as part of a portfolio, renewable energy can be a contributor, but what you really need to make sure you have is enough what I call always available generation in the electric side, which may be nuclear or coal or natural gas. That's what it's going to take. And quite frankly, to make those investments, one of the big risks is really in the public policy arena, where it's very hard to get permitting to build a new facility, whether it's even a renewable energy plant or a natural gas plant or an electric transmission line. We need to fix that. We need to make it, I'm not saying throw out all of our environmental laws, but let's have a system where you apply for a permit and there's a reasonable period of time and then you're done. It's either yes, go ahead with the project, or no, it's rejected. But you got to have more certainty and more timeliness to that process. And that's a public policy issue.
Yeah, you talk about that. What should lawmakers in Washington be doing then to protect all of us when it comes to energy?
Yeah, the number one, let's take a look at our environmental permitting laws at the federal level. No question there can be changes there. Number two, let's make sure we're not encouraging policies that end up having us shut down existing power plants that have a useful life left. I understand that some folks want to pursue the agenda to reduce the carbon footprint, but we're going to be using more and more electricity to do that in other sectors of the economy. You got to have a reliable electric sector. You really do. We rely on it every day now so much, and we're going to rely on it even more in the future. And so maintaining those plants, those generation plants that can produce power in a reliable way, man, that's the first step we ought to take. I say it all the time. It's the old saying, when you find yourself in a hole, the first step is stop digging deeper. Let's stop shutting down very workable, viable power plants that produce electricity today.
Jim Matheson, appreciate your insight here on Flashpoint.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Still to come on Flashpoint, Charlotte city leaders pushing to add more trees to the Queen City, the goal they're working to achieve after years of real estate development.